This video tutorial and guide is for installing GDAL onto a macOS and also a Windows machine. This will be part one, which will be the Mac install. And in this first part, I'm not going to be discussing what GDAL is in detail. I'm just going to get to the actual steps of downloading and installing. But if you want to find out a little bit more about GDAL, there's a preamble here in the post that I'm using, which is called What It Is, Why It's Useful, and How to Install It. So this is the preamble right here, and I discuss in the preamble the data model that's utilized by GDAL for both vector and raster, and then also how it's utilized in GIS software generally. And what we're trying to accomplish here in part one of a macOS install is installing GDAL so that you can access it from your command line, or essentially your terminal. The reason that you would want to do that is because you want to create efficiency in your GIS workflow where you have the utilities of GDAL quickly and easily available through command line statements. We're going to go through the process here of first downloading the software that's needed and then making sure that our terminal can see GDAL. So to get started, we're going to do two things. We're going to be downloading GDAL itself, and importantly, we're going to be installing a Python version that is appropriate to the GDAL install. The GDAL installs, there's several different versions that are readily available, and each one's going to be working with a different version of Python, I believe. 2.2 is working with Python 3.6 version. High Sierra, and I believe versions going back a bit, operating system versions going back a bit, you're going to have a default of Python 2.7. So you want to make sure that you get the Python installed correct. So let's start with that first. I'm just going to skip the GDAL here for a second, straight to Python. So in the post, you'll see there's a link here, Python 3.6. And remember, you need to make sure that you're using the right version. So the GDAL 2.2, if you're going to be utilizing that package, which was produced in the spring or late winter, spring of 2018, you'll be doing 3.6. And so if you go to python.org, downloads, releases, this is the 3.6 version. So if I come back here to downloads, you can see that there's many different versions that are available. And what I was pointing to in the post is just 3.6 itself. At the bottom, regardless of the version, you're going to have the different installers. And obviously, we're not going to be doing a Windows here. We're going to be on a Mac. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on the Mac version. And it'll download as a package. And then what I'm going to do is continue and install it. Okay. And it's going to install onto the hard drive. You should probably keep the installation location as default unless you have some reason for changing it. It's going to write it into your library in the framework section. We can check that in just a second. So as it finishes up, you just want to check to make sure that it's actually there, and we can do that together in just a moment here. I'm going to pause the video while it finishes up running. Okay, once you get a successful install, notice, let's check to make sure that it's going in the right location. So I'm going to delete the installer, and then what I can do is just do a Command-Shift-G, and we want to check in the framework section of the library. So if we go into library here, and then we can see frameworks, you want to make sure that you have on your Python framework that you have a 3.6 here. That's what you want to make sure. That's what you're looking for. And we can see that we downloaded it. It's 2/28 on a Wednesday, and we can see that we downloaded it at 2/27. So it is there, and that's what we needed. Now let's go back, and we're going to do the 2.2 GDAL install. So if we click on the link for framework section, under the Site King Chaos, this is where you would also get a QGIS install for Mac. Down here towards the bottom, you'll see the complete 2.2 GDAL section, and there's a discussion here. Okay. So here's the download package. Just going to click on that. It's going to take a moment to download. I'm just going to pause the video. Okay, once it's downloaded, just go ahead and open up the disk image, and it's going to then give you a folder here. The README is important to review. It tells you a little bit about the contents, so you can see that it's more than just GDAL itself that's being installed. And it discusses the issue of Python, what it needs. It also talks about how to install. It also talks about your bash profile, which we'll review in just a moment. So here's the package. Now if you just double click on it, you're going to get a warning that says that this is from an unidentified developer. And so to open this more effectively, you would do a right click and go to Open With, and then Installer. And then that's going to let you open it. And we're just going to pop through these. We're going to do the license, agree with it. We're going to install it, and as it installs, then we'll go ahead and segue into step 2, which is actually getting our command line to work with GDAL. So I'm going to move this to the trash now. It's installed. And you can also check on it again if you want to. So that would be Command-Shift-G. And then under Library, it's going to be in our frameworks. And you can see here, here's GDAL, here's Geos, SQLite, and the image.io. So it installed all those things correctly. And of course, that's where our Python framework is also. Okay. So the next step here, we've installed the two things that we need, which is the correct Python version, in this case 3.6, the correct GDAL, is the latest version, 2.2. And we're ready now to go ahead and set up our bash profile within Terminal. And if you haven't used Terminal before, there are several ways to access it. So the first thing you could do is you could just go to your Finder and go to Applications and go down to Utilities at the bottom, and you can see it here. So if you open it up, it's going to be sitting in the dock down here on your dock, wherever you have your dock. And under Options, you can keep it in the dock so you can access it later. And the other option is you can do a Command spacebar, and that's going to get you to search, and then you would just type in Terminal. Okay, so that's what I just did right now, and you can see I have a Terminal session here. And I've customized mine, so yours might look different. And the next thing we want to do is we want to actually set up in our profile, our shell, we want to get a path set up that is going to recognize where the frameworks are located for GDAL. And we simply do a copy paste of this particular code right here, and we're going to put that into our terminal. So it's literally just a copy paste, and if we return, we should not get an error. If we don't get an error, then we're set. And then what we can do now is the very last step, which is to test it. So we test it with GDAL info, which is a command within GDAL to get the version. And if it's giving you back a version and a release date, in this case it's 3/19/2018, you're set to go. And it's not particularly exciting at this point because we haven't utilized any of the GDAL commands with any spatial data, but as soon as we get into working with spatial data with GDAL, it'll become quickly apparent how powerful this way of working with GDAL from the command line can be for a GIS workflow. So hopefully this has been helpful in getting set up for a Mac. And I should just mention before the second video, which is installing on the Windows, down here at the bottom under Future Notes and References, there's a couple different options for macOS. So in this case, we can use npm GDAL package install. There's also or gr package install, which is related to GDAL. We can also do it through Homebrew. So if you're used to using Homebrew Package Manager, you can do it that way also, and that's a pretty simple command. The way that we have done it in this video is standard way of doing it. So if you don't feel comfortable with any of these versions, certainly what we just did will get you GDAL onto a macOS.